So this is Salado Creek through the years from 1870 through the present. Most of these photos came from both residents in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. They were taking photos of the creek. And I'm going to show them to you kind of quickly here. They weren't trying to show the vegetation. They're showing kids having fun in the creek. But if you look on the banks, you can see the vegetation. And a creek has one job. That job is to transport water and sediment. And that's what it's doing. Look at the bank here. Lots of foot traffic at this area, fishing hole, but it's got good diversity of vegetation. Even with the trampling, there's still vegetation present. Look at the large wood adjacent to the creek. And I also notice the carved in footsteps to get up a little higher. So they had large wood adjacent to the creek, a diversity of riparian vegetation, even a worm bucket there on the ground. Hopefully they picked that up. But floods do happen. Some floods are worse than others. Some are just a little bit out of bank. Some are pretty serious, like this one. It happens. Water may get murky a little bit after the flood, but look at the vegetation on the bank. Water clears up. Again, we can see black willow on the right. Behind the folks on the far side, water willow, a forb. So we can ID some of the vegetation from these 70-year-old photographs, which is good to have this kind of history. If you look here, emery sedge, the tall grass on the right, that's either Johnson grass or southern wild rice. I don't know which, can't tell, but beautiful creek. The village of Salado, the first Anglo resident came in 1834, but was run off by the Indian attacks and Santa Anna and his attacks. They abandoned it in 1836. And then the next time it was settled by Anglos was 1850. So there's been a lot of history through the years. This area, I'm thinking, may be west of Salado. I've been on that stretch, and I think it's part of the Robertson Ranch. Beautiful section, lots of rock bottom on that area of the creek, solid ledge rock type. And I think this slide is down near East Amity. Of course, the slides were photographs that didn't have any identification on them. Family member gave us permission to copy these. Here is some a Google image map of Salado, things I'm going to be talking about. So at the top, that arrow points down to the Main Street Bridge. If you went to the social last night, you likely crossed the Main Street Bridge. The next bridge to the east is the Mill Creek Road Bridge. Just east of that, these are all public access bridges. There's the Chisholm Trail Bridge, which is right by a golf course. And then the far east side is East Amity Bridge. On the south side of the creek, the Serena statue, which used to be in the water, I'll show you some slides of that, is now up on high ground. But even that statue since 2010 has been underwater, even where it's at. Pace Park, I'm going to reference that. And then Table Rock, an early land feature that was historic. This is the first known photo of a bridge on Salado Creek. You're looking from the First Baptist Church area to the southeast. So the downtown is there on the right. Salado College, which was abandoned sometime in the 1870s, 1880s possibly, is there on the upper right. But notice the scarcity of large trees. In the 1870s, this bridge was built somewhere between 1867 and 1870. But why are there so few trees? Well, I gave you a clue earlier. The Tonkawas were one of the early tribes that were here. Later on, Kiowa, Waco Indians, the most feared of all, Comanches. And in the 1870s, the Comanches were still having raids on settlements. So they were cutting those trees down to make the raids a little less they couldn't hide in the trees. Plus, they were heating their homes, cooking with wood, so they used a lot of wood. But notice that bridge, it's spanning the creek, which is a good way to build a bridge, make the bridge invisible to the creek. But it's a little bit narrow at the base of that rock. May be a problem later on. Here's one of the earliest photos taken from that footbridge of a baptism on the north bank of Salado Creek by First Baptist Church. Pretty good bit of woody vegetation visible. This is the first iron top bridge. Well, where did it come from? It replaced the footbridge that was washed out in 1900. So look at the vegetation. Now, 25 to 30 years after the Indian attacks were over, we're starting to see some woody vegetation growing, looking good on the banks. We've got riparian vegetation down there on the bottom, but still a lot of gravel. Again, a creek transports water and sediment being the gravels. There's the statue of Serena and her magic catfish in front of her. That was at a very nice spring that flows water all the time. That was the original location right here, and now it's up here behind one of the buildings, and there's a public parking area right there. You can come to it, walk down, cross the rock bridge. There's a funny story about the Serena statue. One of the floods, I think around 2010, it toppled the statue. It rolled her down the creek. And the sculptor was called in, and he noticed that one of her fingers, I don't know which hand, was broken, gone, lost in the flood. And the sculptor said, I'll give $50 to anybody that can find it. There's a bunch of kids in the crowd. They all went to running. They said an old man reached down and said, is this what you're talking about? And he found it right there. So the original Serena site east of Main Street Bridge, the new site is west. And there's where she resides now. But that site there it's had water on it. The first iron top bridge, a slightly closer view. Somewhere the photos weren't dated, but somewhere between 1900 and 1913 was when that was taken. And this is Main Street, circa 1900, 1913. Lots of mules and horses using the road as well as wagons. And then this picture was taken west of the bridge, and it's either about where the Interstate 35 is, or it's a little further west on the Robertson Ranch, which has been in that family for a long time. It's got a Southern style plantation, 2-story mansion on the property. Beautiful place. And then now we're looking at it from the southwest, looking northeast. This would be probably close to where Serena is now, but look at the vegetation. We want to see more and more of this riparian vegetation showing up through the years. Now, second iron top bridge built in 1914. Why? Because the one washed out in 1913. So again, floods happen. It's not the first time that bridges have washed out. Now here's some of the family photos. This is the current Main Street bridge made out of concrete, taken in the mid-50s. On the east side of the bridge, there's a sidewalk and a guardrail that was added in the 60s. The west side still looks like it is here. But that to the north, to the left of that photo, would be part of the First Baptist Church property. Look at the vegetation. They're not mowing it, to the ground in the 50s. Here's a large tree on the south bank, west between the interstate and the rock dam, the little low water rock dam. Large wood still there, 1965. Here's Salado Creek in the 60s. Now the First Baptist Church is to the right. You can see some tents there. Look like they're probably having, maybe a vacation Bible school or some sort of event, a lot of people. But you can see under the canopy of the tall trees, it's been trimmed up a little bit now. in the 60s. On the south side, which over on the left, that's the side that's closest to the Stagecoach Inn, if you happen to be staying there. And you can see the interstate in the background and the rock dam in the foreground. But good vegetation on the south side especially, and it's not bad on the north side, but it's going to start changing. Now here's a list of all the flood events. Now right over here near Little River is a gauge station on Little River and Highway 95, and here's a list of all the high water events at that location. Now Salado is back over here. Salado Creek runs in and right there joins Little River. So whatever happens at that flood station is probably also happening here in Salado. So that's the top 25 floods, goes back as far as 1921. I'm gonna come back to that because we're gonna start tying in, like at the bottom of the page, this photo here was taken January of 67, and the third highest flow event happened May of 65, a year and a half before that. If you look at the woody trees, they're skint, aren't they? Not a lot of low branches, but the riparian herbaceous, grassy, forb type vegetation is still there. But those trees are used to that. They can and will recover. But where those arrows are pointing is, again, First Baptist Church property. Now we're looking at the south bank. There's the rock dam. This photo's from the 1970s. Pretty good bit of riparian vegetation right along the water's edge, but there's mowing going on behind it. 1976, pretty good bit of woody vegetation, but notice there is some debris wood right here and some roughed up stuff right there. They had a high flow event sometime that year. It doesn't say when this photo was taken in 1976, but that high flow event was nearly 1st of May of 76. So that's very soon after one of those flows. Now the 24th highest was not a major flow event, but still it was high enough to be recorded. And that red arrow is pointing to a tree that's forked. Look at the trees around that tree with the red arrow. 20 years later, the forked tree is the only one left. And look on the north side, First Baptist Church side. I'm not picking on First Baptist Church. I'm just helping you to orient yourself. But now we've got mowing widespread on both sides of the creek. But look at the flood events between 86 and 93, 9 to 3 years before this picture, 4 flood events. So they have had some issues with trees being stripped out. And that's one of the problems. If we go back right here on the south side, we've got one row of trees on the bank. If you lose that row of trees, you don't have any reinforcements behind it. So we need multiple layers of trees, a wide riparian area to give stability to that creek. Here's 2011. Look at the gravel. That gravel, a lot of that deposit is from these high flow events. Look at, in fact, look at the chart. On 2009, September of 2009, the 19th high flow event happened. A year later, September of 2010, the 5th highest event happened. And this photo was taken in June of 2011. So 9 months later. So 2 very recent flood events had deposited quite a bit of gravel. Anytime you slow water down, such as this rock dam is doing and other bridges, it causes the sediment to drop out. And that can be an impediment to the health of the creek. Here we are in 76. Okay, look, my quote at the bottom. These 2 photos are worth seeing again. So we're repeating, but 20 years difference. And now that's been 30 years ago since this photo was taken. North side, again, First Baptist Church is behind Nancy Carter, but look at the riparian vegetation. That's way better than seeing white gravel, way better. It's kind of a blurry photo here, but again, The north side of the bank is at the top of the photo, and a little bit of the south side. Good vegetation in the 60s. North side again, a little bit more elevated camera angle from the 1950s. I'm not going to say First Baptist Church because it says it right there. But if you're a player, if you own land, you're a player in the health of the creek going through town. Here we are back to 2011. Note the loss of woody vegetation on both banks. We don't have those reinforcements. We don't have those extra layers of trees. As beautiful as this creek is, it needs to be protected. What are these motorized tracks doing down there? Hauling gravel out. Not at this location, but on the golf course proper. The village of Salado was fined by Texas Parks and Wildlife about 10 to 15 years ago for illegal removal of sand, gravel, or marl from a public waterway. They had a backhoe and a dump truck in there getting gravel out. They said, well, the golfers don't like to look at it. It looks ugly. So they were fined. But I was by that area within 6 months. One of those little corrugated plastic signs were sitting there on the side of the road, and it said TPW has approved, TPW permit approved for removal of gravel. So they did pay their fine and get their permit. Now this is Table Rock, south side of Salado Creek, across from Pace Park. And you can see it's a large level rock, a landmark. Before the 1921 flood, that's what it looked like. So the first and the second highest flow events happened in the 20s. So Table Rock went from that to that. Wintertime shot, we can't see a lot of the tree cover in that one. Here it is sometime after 21, and they did have this photo dated roughly between 22 and 25. Good woody vegetation, even though those two high flow events happened. But notice there's reinforcements, layer after layer here. That helped. Here's Table Rock on the right-hand side as it appeared in 82, a wintertime photo. Lots of gravel in that area, even to this day. But still good vegetation. Wintertime shot in 86. But look at this photo, compare it to this one. So progress, trying to make things look pretty, sometimes we make it ugly and we don't realize it. So to the creek, taking out all that woody cover is hurtful. That's a hindrance. You know, we need to leave some woody cover for the stability of that creek. Here's Pace Park across the way. Now you would expect this to be mowed, and over there where the cars are, mow it away. Keep mowing it. 20 or 30 feet on this side of between the cars and the creek, that ought to be left in vegetation. I'll show you later what it can look like if we leave it. So from where you stopped at the stop sign, leaving that brewery to turn right, to come into town, that area right there is where the concrete bridge is, Main Street Bridge. So that's the high water mark from the 1921 flood in Salado. And that was also that #1 high flow event at Little River. So I was trying to eyeball that yesterday driving. From the water below the bridge, I would guess there was probably 25 feet of water over that. I mean, from the water, 25 feet of water over the creek when this photo would have been taken. And there's where I took the photo of about the same location. And water, we go back, here's the First Baptist Church grounds. Some of those buildings may have been near getting in water, even as high up as they are. And there they are again right there. So a major flood. Here's again Serena. Notice the woody trees behind Serena. And again, this is that little spring that empties into Salado Creek. But that photo was in 05. Here's a winter shot, undated, but sometime after that. This old big sycamore is a survivor. It's still there. But then 2009, 2010, those two floods within a year wiped those trees out. So again, we didn't have enough depth. We didn't have a big enough team of trees, like a football team that doesn't have enough quarterbacks or enough, running backs. You got to have more than one to make it through the season. And we need more trees. 2011, it's trying to come back. The trees grow slow, so it's going to have to sprout from the roots. Most of these riparian plants will do that. They sprout from the roots. The broken off pieces can float down, get lodged in sediment, and begin to root and grow. This photo from the 1960s is between the interstate and Main Street Bridge on the south side of the creek. And Linda Cawthorn, who helped me gather a lot of these photos, we did a riparian workshop for the village of Salado right in the public administration building. We had it in the courtroom building and had 25 or so people, partly administrators, partly just residents that attended. And we restaged that photo. Look at the vegetation on the north bank where that yellow arrow is in the 1960s, and then look at it in 2011 on the north bank. We need to do a better job. Now, this photo was taken on the Chisholm Trail Road. The golf course is right there. I may be done talking about First Baptist Church, and now I'm going to harp on golf course. That bridge was put in after a golf cart bridge was washed out in one of the floods. Now that's maybe 48-inch tin horns. You can see a guy walking right there. Don't know how tall he is, but maybe 42, 48-inch tin horns. As big as Salado Creek is, do you think that can flow all the water that goes through Salado? What happens? Well, we get sediment deposited. And this is the area where the dump truck and the backhoe were working. I've got a photo of that. I didn't include it. Try to protect the innocent. And then over here is the Chisholm Trail Road. Notice the washout right here. This photo was taken almost a year after that second flood event. They still hadn't got the road repaired, but it took out the rest of that. Well, it was removed. The final dirt one was removed somewhere between 2015 and 2017. So we're going to go and concentrate looking at this area right here, and we're going to concentrate right here. So now, with the bridge gone, you don't see as much gravel. It flushes on through. That's what a creek does, transports water and sediment. And we're starting to get good riparian vegetation coming in right here, especially. April of 23, here's a September of 21, even before that. That looks really good, except for one thing. I forgot to mention it earlier. One landowner somewhere upstream from here planted elephant ears on their creek bank. And it's as far down as I can get to on public roads. It's 2 miles downstream now. You can see elephant ear. So again, elephant ear empties into Little River empties into the Brazos. So eventually elephant ear will be in the Brazos. But really good riparian vegetation. Now we got something going on right here. Can you tell? Yeah, we're mowing. And that's not a typical mower. That's one of those golf course mowers that can mow down about a 1/2 inch tall. So when he gets through mowing, then he gets the weed eater out and weed eats. This is what it can do. And now look beyond this red arrow. That's the potential that creek is showing us, that it can heal itself if we'll get out of the way and quit messing it up. So again, we can't continue doing that if we want to have healthy creeks and rivers in Texas, not just Salado Creek, but any creek and river. Again, now I'm pulled back, showing you the good vegetation. I don't know what the diversity of plants between this road, the Chisholm Trail Road, and that old bridge is, but there's, there could be 50 to 100 different plants right there in that one little spot. Now we're going to go on a seaside adventure here. This is Chisholm Trail Road on the east side. The part that I showed you on that Google Earth that had washed away, later on in 2012, I think, 2011. Now, this is probably from the 70s to the 80s. Linda had this photo, and I did not get the date from her, but if you look at that little cooler there, I think that's 1980s. And that little raft is one of them that you probably won free if you sent $20 in to cover shipping. You could win some of those in those scams back then. But this area here, I'm gonna back up. Look at the vegetation behind them. Look at the debris pretty high up. So there was a flood somewhere in the 80s that put debris up high. Same area. Elephant ears showing up somewhere. I can't see it from this angle, but somewhere right in there. But look at the ground cover, the taller trees. We got different ages of trees. Look at that power pole where the red arrow is. 2008. Here's the same area in 2023. There's the power pole. Did the creek cause all that vegetation to get taken out under those trees, or did man do that? You know, we're developing subdivisions and trying to make it where you can see the creek, but it's not always healthy to make the creek look like that. Now, they're going to go on downstream, and that arrow is pointing to a tree that's going to be in several photos. So Salado Creek, again, could those 4 tin horns carry that much water? No. So as we go on down, here's 2011. Large wood washes in, gets incorporated with sediment, becomes like, we put rebar in concrete to strengthen it. That large wood's like putting I-beams in the concrete. So it adds stability to the banks. We need to leave it there. A little zoomed out view of the same location. Look at the vegetation on either side though. Looks pretty good compared to now. Same location. So again, we're over clearing some of the areas. That's floodplain area. It will flood. The one on the right will flood in a high flood, but that one on the left will flood pretty often. And this area, I think, it wasn't identified. It looks like somebody had a crossing of some kind here, an old wood crossing. But if you look at the hill back here, where the gap in the creek is, I believe this photo was taken looking west from the East Amity Bridge, because this photo was taken looking west from the East Amity Bridge, and I think that gap is right there. And in these creeks, we'll have riffles, which are the gurgling brooks where the shallow water, usually water running over the rocks is. The riffles will run down and it gets into a slightly deeper area called a run. And then the deepest areas, the ones that don't go dry in the hottest drought, are the pools. So we've got this, but again, good vegetation on both sides of the creek. Here's the Amity Bridge looking on the north side, really good. Should the county be fussed at for placing these rocks right here? Or did the county do that? No, the creek did that. That's how big some of these rocks can tumble down in floods. They probably should be removed because it's slowing down the water. Now we're coming back and we're going to start looking. Here's Main Street Bridge again. We're going to start looking at some more modern photos. Nice straight rows. Kudos to whoever did the mowing. But they're mowing right as close as they can get to the creek. We were here, Brenda and I were walking on the creek in July, and we had already been over there at the Rock Dam and crossed under the bridge and came over toward the old Serena area, and I heard a weed eater fired up. And so I zoomed in on it, and there's the maintenance guy. He's already mowed. Now he's weed eating right down to the water's edge. We got to do better than that. Because here's what it can be. If we'll back off 20, 30 feet, it will spread and that vegetation will grow. The appropriate vegetation will take the spot it needs to be. The water-loving, wet-loving plants will be near the water. The more upland plants will come in further out away from the water. Now here's another, I'm through harping on the golf course. These businesses right here on the north side of Salado Creek and the brewery on the south side, they want to mow their country so people can sit on the decks and see the creek. So they mow quite a bit. But depending on where the creek is running, and it does shift, it goes laterally side to side depending on the flood events. If you're sitting up there, you're not likely to be able to see the creek anyway. So we don't need to be trying to mow too close. There's how, small it can be. That's right there by the bridge, 10 feet wide maybe. This is further down past the old Serena area. Did y'all see that bridge yesterday? Yeah, they may have pulled it out. It's a portable walkway that they can put truck tires on one end on axles and drag it out with a tractor if the flood's coming. So it's a portable bridge, but again, they made the bridge invisible to the river so the low flow events go under it. Here you can see mowing up here, probably okay. Just don't try to come down here and mow. And the rocks that were added by the village of Salado makes a nice place. Here's someone, I think she was drawing the creek right there. And I walked on by and look at the sycamore coming in right in the rock. But when I walked on by, I noticed some invaders right in here. Look at the sycamore. They look good right there. But what about these invaders? Can you pick it out? Here's a small one. Here's an older one. You'll recognize it if you're from South Texas. And Wasatch is moving north. It comes up Interstate 35, seeds fall off of trucks or other tire tracks. It's coming up 281. It's spreading north. We've also got giant cane spreading. Cattle will eat this if they got access to it, but if they don't have access, they don't have a chance to eat it. Elephant ear there. Brazilian vervain or Brazilian verbena, square stemmed, invasive. This is right above Chisholm Trail Bridge. A dense stand of elephant ear right there. Now here, I guess I wasn't through with the golf course, sorry. The mowing right up above, but look at the sloughing right here. Grasses, especially grasses that are mowed short, don't have root systems that can withstand the high flow events. We need riparian vegetation, we need shrubs and trees. Here's emery sedge right down here on the edge of the water, right on the front lines of the battle. It's doing its job. What sloughed was behind it. So we need to back off the mowing. So what if you lose a golf ball? Chalk it up and keep going. Even when we have nice clumps of switchgrass, it's getting weed-eated to death. And I wonder, did they leave these elephant ears or did they just grow back real fast? Mill Creek Bridge, water willow, native. Elephant ear introduced, white water lily, native. And this is where I saw that Brazilian verbena at a different time. You'll even see some unusual, not rare, but unusual forbs like bog hemp, which is a wetland obligate that has to be near the water, has to have its roots near the water. So we got the good and the bad in one photo there. And if you're in Salado, there are plenty of these here. Daytime, nighttime, you can drive through Salado and you'll see a lot of deer. What's that deer eating? What it looks like, there's a yellow flower somewhere right in here. It looks like it's eating horse herb. I didn't know they would, but apparently they will. All right, this is my last slide. And it's kind of important because I didn't realize something till I read it right here. But I want to show you the headwaters of Salado Creek are up near Florence. And then this red line shows it coming down, comes through to the west of Gerald, comes through Salado, and then empties into Little River. Here's a graph of the slope of Salado Creek. What's interesting, it says the average slope is 0.4, is that what I'm seeing? No, 0.5 to 0.6. What we normally think of in the Edwards Plateau, the slope of those creeks, which are steeper than they are in the Blackland Prairie, we think of them being 0.3% slope and greater. This is twice that. So this is a very steep section of creek. So it's going to be flashy. It's going to have floods often. Blackland Prairie Creek's over Little River. Now you're back down to flatter slopes of less than 0.3. So Salado Creek is a jewel. It's a gem that we need to take better care of. And I don't know, Renata, if I've got time for questions or not. Yes? Okay. Any questions, comments? Now you know all there is to know about Salado Creek. Yes, ma'am. How do you educate people to not mow? Alexander Neal is sitting back there. I've helped him several years now with riparian workshops that he's put on through the Texas Water Resources Institute. And I happened to write down some dates because there are some of these workshops coming up. October 14th, there'll be a workshop in Medina, west of Medina. October 28th in Wimberley. October 30th at Briggs, Burnett County. And then somewhere in November up in the Granbury Crescent area. These are free one-day workshops. You can find out more. Texas Water Resources Institute, I guess, would be a good search on Google. But back to your question, it's an education, and that's what they're doing with these riparian workshops, trying to educate people. But the people have still, once they've been educated, they've still got to want to fix it. And not, the hardest thing is giving up the mowing. And sometimes it's giving up grazing too close, because grazing can be an issue. But creeks are remarkable in their ability to recover if we get out of the way. If we remove the hindrance, which excessive mowing, excessive grazing, those are hindrances. If we remove that, then the creeks will heal themselves without any diesel smoke being expended. Now, what does that mean? We're not putting any bulldozers in the creek. It's just the creek healing after we remove the problems. Anything else? Yes. Okay, the question is regarding educating the public. They mow because they're afraid of snakes. Well, snakes are everywhere. And if you've got a big stretch of the creek and you want to fish it, you can mow a little section, or if it's right down from your house, you can mow a section. Just don't mow every foot of what you own. Signage is a good way to cure a lot of the fear. Put up that this is a non-mow area to encourage riparian health, wildlife habitat. Try to let them know what you're doing and why you're not mowing it. I mean, if it's waist-high grass, they probably don't need to be walking in there anyway. So, question in the back earlier. A radical question, okay. Do you want, hold on a second. Radical questions, get the microphone.
Thank you. I'm from Kirk County, and probably you heard about an incident that happened in Kirk County recently. And we've had workshops there about riparian restoration, which are completely ignored. You know, I watch almost daily 18-wheelers pulling, you know, huge trailers full of these well, they weren't fall downs, they were push down trees, you know, and they're delivering them to San Antonio, whatever, for mulch. And my question, I guess, is, has anybody reached out to an agency for more help in proper restoration? Because it's just going to happen again, you know? Okay. And number two, this is my radical thing. You know, I know that, I think I know, I don't know what I don't know, but you know, navigable streams are controlled by the state of Texas. Is that right? Why are we allowed to continue to degrade the edges of these navigable streams? So that's my radical question. I know in a state where, you know, property rights rule over everything, you know, I don't live on the river, so, but, you know, to have the right to kill people down downstream because of your property rights just doesn't seem right to me. You know, if we could enforce proper care of the river edges, you know, we might avoid some, you know, because in 1960s, when I was a little girl, we had floods along the Guadalupe, you know? So this is not new. This is just the same thing over and over and over again with more extreme consequences. So that's my radical. You know, I think we need to change statewide the care of the edges of our navigable streams. So that's where I am. I'm a rebel.
The educational process has been going on for 20-something years. Sky Louie in the Nueces River watershed started this effort. She sadly passed away a few years ago, but we're carrying on trying to help restore the creeks, trying to educate people. And like you said, those floods happen in those flashy areas as well. One of the good things that may come out of the terrible loss of life is that people are going to have to become more aware of the riparian areas. And in helping those landowners over there, Alexander Neal with the Texas Water Resources Institute and several other people, Steve Nelly and several groups, co-authored a little one-page publication on what to do, what to take out, what to leave. So Alexander, tell them a little about that.
Sure. There were a number of agencies and nonprofits and organizations and individuals that helped contribute to that publication and some other publications. Some of those educational resources can be found on the Hill Country Alliance's webpage. But there has been some coordination from some agencies, such as the Texas A&M Forest Service, also the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, that have been working with some of the disaster agencies that have been involved in Kerr County. So there's a lot of education that still needs to continue, though, with different agencies, working cross hands with other agencies and with other landowners and people getting educated. So to answer the first part of the question, there's been a lot of different groups that are working on that. But then on the other question, talking about what can be done or what can be regulated, I think the answer to that question is going to be continued education.
Okay. And that publication that wound up a very simple, brief one-pager, but the gist of it, if the material was loose, it could be removed. If it was going to wash down against a bridge, it could be bad. But if the woody tree was still partially rooted, it should be left. Again, it's adding stability to the creek. So that publication, you ought to look for it. Very well worded, short, succinct statements that will help people to better manage for their creeks. Another question.
Yeah, two questions. One is the part of the law you were talking about is for navigable waters. These aren't navigable waters. So do you get the law to change to have it for creeks like this? Because they don't fall under navigable water. So that's something to think about. And the other question I have is, what does the golf course think about losing property?
I can't speak for the golf course, and they probably wouldn't let me, but I've heard that they have sold the south 3 holes of the golf course or done away with that. So I don't know that for a fact, but everyone's got to do their part to quit mowing right up to the water, to leave some trees, let it grow back. Most of the time in riparian areas, we don't have to plant things. Now, they are planting in the Kerr and Guadalupe River area because it's so vast of damage. But most of the time, these riparian areas will heal themselves and the vegetation will wash downstream from upstream areas and it can recover very quickly. Now, the Kerrville area that was, terrible and people wanted to get in there and do things and probably a lot of chainsaw work was done and skid steer work that was done that maybe didn't have to be done, but they wanted to clean it up. They wanted it to look like it did before the flood, minus all the big ball cypress that are gone. But sometimes in that cleanup, those motorized tracks are doing a lot of damage because they're churning up the soil, the sediment, dislodging seedlings that are trying to grow. So again, keeping diesel smoke and chainsaw smoke out of the creeks is a better option if it's available. Any last questions? You got, I didn't see where up there. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. Brian Hummel, who's in the San Antonio area, has applied for permits to actually work with the local landowners in Kirk County to actually put the mulch of the hillsides. He's done that at Camp Bullis. It's been effective. So there are mechanisms to slow down, because what's happened historically is those areas were grasslands and et cetera. The water was slowed down, you know, and stuff like this. So this is an artificial way to do it. He's in the permit process. I don't know. He's got one more permit to get, but this is a way if private landowners really want to, and there is interest he's found in Kirk County, because basically not only it helps with the floods, it actually helps restore the soil conditions on those hillsides. Ultimately, the decay of those is going to actually create soil over time. So there are solutions out there. We just like to educate and promote to those private landowners things that will help them.
And there's two efforts I'm aware of. One, I think they're trying to get several 100,000 seedlings of some of the sedges germinated in pots to plant on the Guadalupe to help jumpstart recovery. That's one effort. And then Michael Eason, one of our members with the San Antonio Botanical Garden, is working to do plant seed collections this fall in the Guadalupe watershed to help then germinate and grow and then resend those plants back to the Guadalupe. So there's efforts out there. Everybody's wanting to do something good and support them where you can. So I think we're ready. Got a question online?
Yes, we have an online question from Crystal D, who asks, for resources, who would be able to work with individual landowners for assistance working the banks of creeks for undesirable plant removal as well as litter? She says she's in Johnson County.
Or read it one more time. I'm where I can't hear.
Who would be able to work with individual landowners for assistance on working the banks of a creek for undesirable plant removal as well as litter?
Okay, well, Cullum, do you remember if Parks and Wildlife, there was a gentleman that worked and he was with Parks and Wildlife, but you could contract with him and he would come and spray invasive plants on creeks. Is that still a program? Healthy Creeks Initiative? Let me bring you the microphone. The Nueces River watershed was also paying for the spraying of Giant Arundo on the Nueces River.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the program for spraying invasives. I do know that kind of the group that Alexander Neal was talking about with Parks and Wildlife, Hill Country Alliance, AgriLife Forest Service, kind of touches on that. I do know that our Texas Watersheds program, they're actually in our fisheries division, is kind of leading the charge from Parks and Wildlife standpoint with the Kirk County, the Guadalupe River watershed stuff. So they might be a good resource, but we also have biologists in every county in the state of Texas that can help facilitate that, as well as NRCS and AgriLife. So there's quite a bit of assistance available.
Thank you. And if you've got I think a person, if they wanted to help a landowner, an individual or a company, they would have to have a certified applicator's license in order to apply some of these chemicals. Arundo Donax, the chemicals arsenal, and you have to have a permit for that.
Yes, hi. I used to work at Texas Parks and Wildlife, and I was just going to mention that In addition to the riparian, it is the inland fisheries group that works with riparian restoration, dealing with invasives also along the river. So that I would just contact the inland fisheries group and see who is the person to talk with if you're interested. The other thing is that Tim Sigmund is with the private lands group at Texas Parks and Wildlife. You can go on the website and look for private lands, and there's assistance there, as you'd mentioned. So not on the rivers, but in general. So just to mention that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Now,